They abandoned their poor homeless mother. Years later, they regrets it. What happened will shock you. Ruth. The name wasn't supposed to hurt. Yet when the ragged woman kneeling by Third Mainland's edge lifted her face to the rain, Daniel froze. That voice, the lullaby only their mother knew, rose against Lagos traffic like a prayer torn open. 7 years after they cast her out, here she was, barefoot, clutching a soggy Bible and a plastic bag of secrets. Why did she disappear instead of coming home? What truth did she choose to suffer for? And what will it cost them now? The downpour turned the bridge into threads of silver. Motorcycles hissed past, horns stitched sharp lines through the air. Daniel stood under a kiosk awning, suit jacket darkened to ash, trying to convince himself his bones were lying. But the tune wouldn't let him. "Sleep, my son," she sang, the old call and response their father used to hum on generator nights. He had not heard it since the evening they barred Ruth from the doorway and told her to leave. Amara arrived breathless, umbrella useless against the wind. "You called. Daniel, where is she?" Her lipstick ran in red commas, the rain editing her face into worry. He pointed, unable to speak. A circle had formed, hawkers in neon vests, a girl with pink braids. A man filming on his phone like this was another daily miracle of Lagos to be posted and forgotten. In the middle, Ruth rocked on her heels, gray scarf clinging to her temples, the plastic bag pressed to her chest as if it were a fragile child. Cheek pushed through last, headphones still around his neck, t-shirt soaked. "I came from Yaba as fast as—" He stopped. "No." The word fell like a bead from a broken rosary. For a second, all three siblings were small again, gathered at her lap while mosquitoes tapped their ankles, and she sang them past hunger, until sleep had mercy. "Let's go," Amara said, suddenly decisive. "We take her home now." Daniel caught her wrist. "Home to what? She chose the street, she—" "Chosen?" Chike's laugh was sharp. "You forget who chose for her." The man with the phone stepped closer, angling for a cleaner shot. "Madam, sing again," he coaxed. Ruth's eyes lifted, clouded but bright with a stubborn joy. She shook her head and stood, her knees trembling. The crowd sighed, the phone dipped. When she turned, her gaze brushed Daniel and flinched, not in fear but in recognition that hurt. She knew them. She always had. "Mom," Amara whispered. The words skidded on wet pavement and stopped at Ruth's feet. Ruth swayed, catching it, like catching a ball a child had thrown too hard. She opened the plastic bag and fished for something, hands shaking. A corner of a photograph appeared. 3 children with powdered sugar smiles, and a woman with a yellow head tie. The picture was warped by time and humidity. Still, it glowed. "Please," Amara said, moving forward. "Come with us." She reached for Ruth's elbow. Daniel stepped in, unsure whether to shield or to block, and found himself face to face with the woman he had learned to erase. There were new lines around her mouth, a thinness in her cheeks, but the eyes were the same. Brown, steady, patient like river stones. He wanted to accuse her of ruining everything. He wanted to drop his head on her shoulder and sleep. A bus ground to a stop beside them, tires spitting water. "Oyingbo, Yaba, CMS," the conductor shouted. The noise jolted Ruth. She took a step and the world wavered under her. The plastic bag slipped. A nurse's lanyard flashed within it, an ID card with her photograph and a name that wasn't hers. "Ruth Adebayo?" Chiki blurted, reading upside down. "Since when are you—" Ruth tried to answer. Her lips formed a word. "Muna," as if calling to a child none of them recognized. Then her knees simply unstitched. The crowd gasped. The plastic bag burst on the concrete, coughing out their childhood photos, a small bottle of pills, and that hospital ID with a new surname shining like a riddle in the rain. Sirens wailed from somewhere beyond the stalled traffic as Daniel cradled Ruth, staring at the name on the card, a life they knew nothing about. And Amara's phone began to vibrate with an unknown number that wouldn't stop ringing. Rainwater still clung to the glass walls of Daniel's apartment when they gathered again, hours later. The city outside was a blur of taillights and drizzle, but inside, the sharp scent of antiseptic still lingered, carried from the hospital where Ruth had been admitted but refused to speak beyond asking for rest. The coffee table between them was a small battlefield. Every item from the plastic bag lay there: warped photographs, the soggy Bible, a bottle of pills labeled for blood pressure, and the hospital ID with that other name, Ruth Adebayo, printed in neat block letters. Daniel sat rigid in his armchair, jaw working, shirt sleeves rolled halfway as if prepared for an argument rather than reflection. "We can't just drag her back here," he said, voice clipped. "We don't know what kind of life she's been living. The woman didn't even want to see us." Amara's voice cracked. "She didn't say that. She was exhausted. She's been God knows where, and you're worried about what? Your reputation?" She picked up a photo. One of the three of them in matching Easter clothes, all white lace and shiny shoes, the edges curled against her fingers. "This is proof enough she never forgot us." Cheek leaned forward, elbows on knees, his damp t-shirt clinging. "You think a stranger keeps your baby pictures in a plastic bag through Lagos rains for 7 years? His voice was low but sharp. "Daniel, she's our mother." Daniel shot him a look. "She's also the woman who left us without a home, who vanished instead of explaining herself. Who?" He stopped, swallowing the rest. Amara's eyes narrowed. "No, Daniel. She didn't vanish. We pushed her out." The air thickened. Nobody wanted to touch the truth too hard. The night came back to all of them in pieces. Uncle Boma's voice telling them their mother had signed away the deed to their father's house because she'd squandered the savings. The shame of watching neighbors whisper. The way Daniel had shut the door with his own hands, convinced she had betrayed them. Chiki reached for the hospital ID, studying it. "Why Adebayo? Did she marry again? Was she hiding from someone?" Amara's fingers brushed another object they hadn't noticed before. A folded sheet of paper sealed in clear tape. She peeled it open carefully, the paper brittle and yellowing. Inside were photocopies of money order receipts, each one sent to different bank accounts. Her breath caught when she saw the names: Daniel, Amara, Cheek. Daniel frowned. "That's impossible. I've never..." He stopped, tracing the dates. Some of them matched times when his rent had been mysteriously covered after a bad business deal, when he'd assumed a friend had helped quietly. "Unsigned," Chike murmured. "But the handwriting on the addresses, it's hers." The weight of the revelation pressed into the room. Ruth had been sending them money all along, even after they'd condemned her. Daniel pushed back in his chair, running a hand over his face. "Why? If she had that kind of money, why live like..." "Maybe it wasn't much," Amara cut in, voice trembling. "Maybe it was all she had, and she gave it away to us." Silence settled, broken only by the muffled hum of the fridge. Cheeky exhaled slowly. "We need to find out where she's been, what really happened with the house, and why she's Adebayo now." Daniel's phone buzzed. The screen lit with a hospital number. He stared at it, reluctant. "Answer it," Amara urged. He did. A nurse's voice came through, urgent and clear. "Mr. Daniels, your mother's asking for you. And there's something you should see. Come tonight." Daniel ends the call, looking at both siblings. "She's ready to talk, but only if all three of us come. And she says it's about the day we threw her out." The rain had stopped by morning, but Lagos still felt damp, like the city hadn't fully wrung out its grief. The siblings drove together, the kind of tense, silent drive where every pothole felt like an accusation. Ruth had given them an address, one that made Daniel frown when he typed it into Google Maps. It was their childhood street. When the car rolled to a stop, it wasn't at the weathered, blue-painted house they remembered. The walls were now cream and gold, the fence taller, the mango tree trimmed down to a stump. The rusted gate had been replaced by something sleek and black. And inside that gate, laughter spilled from the veranda, children in neat uniforms darting past, A woman in Ankara head wrap hanging laundry and a man watering potted plants. This can't be right, Amara murmured, but the number on the gate matched. Daniel squared his shoulders and knocked. The man watering plants wiped his hands on his shorts and came over. Yes? This house, Daniel began, belonged to our late father. It belongs to me now, the man interrupted, polite but firm. We bought it 5 years ago. Everything was done legally. Bought it from who? Cheek asked. The man disappeared briefly, then returned with a folder. Inside were photocopies of legal documents, the house deed, transfer of ownership, signatures. The seller's name stared back at them, Ruth Okoro, their mother's name before marriage. She signed it over to a man named Boma in exchange for clearing a debt, the man explained. Boma sold it to us. We paid in full. Amara's voice trembled. What debt? This house was all we had, my father. The man shook his head. I don't know the details. We were told she owed a large amount. All I know is the papers were in order. The siblings stepped back from the gate, their voices dropping to whispers. This is exactly what Boma told us back then, Daniel said. She wasted the money, got in trouble, and had to sell. But why would she sign using her maiden name? Cheeky countered. And why walk away instead of explaining to us? Amara's eyes darted to the veranda where a neighbor leaned on the railing watching. When Amara caught her gaze, the woman came down the steps and approached, her slippers smacking the wet pavement. You're Ruth's children? She asked quietly. They nodded. The woman glanced toward the house, then lowered her voice. Your mother didn't owe anyone a kobo. She sold that house to save you from men you shouldn't cross. Boma, he's not just some family friend, he's dangerous. Ruth told me once if those men didn't get the deed, they'd take something else. What else? Daniel pressed. The woman's lips tightened. Her words, they'll take my children. For a moment, none of them breathed. The hum of a distant generator filled the space between them. Ask her yourself, the neighbor said finally. But if you do, be ready. Some truths don't let you sleep. Amara's phone buzzed in her hand. It was the hospital. The nurse's voice was sharp this time. You need to come now. Your mother's visitor, Boma, just left her room. The hospital's private ward was hushed in that tense, unnatural way that feels like everyone is holding their breath. The moment the siblings arrived, a nurse pointed down the corridor. He just left, she whispered. Your mother hasn't said a word since. They turned, and there he was, Boma, walking toward the exit as if the place belonged to him. Crisp white caftan, gold wristwatch gleaming, and that oily smile that hadn't aged a day. The sight made Daniel's jaw clench so hard he thought his teeth might crack. Boma! Daniel's voice boomed down the hall. Heads turned. Boma didn't break stride until Daniel stepped directly into his path. Well, if it isn't my favorite godson, Boma said smoothly. And the other two. My, how you've grown. You've got nerve showing your face, Chike snapped. After what you did to her, after stealing our house. Boma chuckled, as if they were children accusing him of eating the last biscuit. Stealing? Tisk. Everything I did was by the book. Your mother signed those papers herself. A fair deal. Debt cleared. What debt? Amara's voice was sharp. We know she didn't owe you a thing. The smile slipped a fraction. Careful, girl, you talk like that. People will think you've been listening to stories. And stories are dangerous. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Boma could hear. You forced her, didn't you? Threatened her. Why? What did you want from her? Boma's gaze flickered, just for a second, to the siblings' faces, measuring them, deciding how much to say. Then he leaned in. Some debts aren't written down. Some are owed in other ways. The implication was foul, and it made Amara's stomach twist. You're going to leave her alone, Daniel said, voice trembling with barely contained rage. If you ever go near her again. Boma cut him off with a low laugh. You think you can protect her now? Where were you when she needed you? You threw her out yourselves. He tapped Daniel's chest with one manicured finger. Remember that before you play the hero. With that, he walked past, the click of his polished shoes echoing down the corridor. Amara exhaled shakily. We need proof. We can't just accuse him. Cheek nodded. If he's as slippery as I think, there'll be records somewhere. Receipts, transactions, something he can't bury. They entered Ruth's room together. She was sitting up now, back against the pillows, hands folded over the thin hospital blanket. Her eyes were tired but alert. You saw him, she said simply. Daniel sat down beside her. We did, and we know he lied to us. Tell us the truth, please. Ruth studied each of them in turn. It's not safe to talk here. There are things you don't understand. But first, her gaze shifted to Amara. Your daughter, how is she? Amara frowned. Muna? She's fine. Before she could finish, her phone rang. It was Muna's school. The teacher's voice was tight with panic. Mrs. Obi, Muna just collapsed in class. We've called an ambulance. The phone slipped in Amara's grip. Ruth gripped her wrist with surprising strength and whispered, This is why I stayed away. The wail of the ambulance siren cut through Lagos traffic like a blade. But inside the hospital emergency unit, time felt both frozen and frantic. Amara clutched Muna's small, limp hand as nurses wheeled her past, monitors already beeping, the child's uniform shirt stained with the faint trace of chalk dust from the classroom floor. Daniel and Cheek burst in moments later, rain clinging to their clothes again as if the sky had joined their panic. Ruth, frail and pale, had insisted on being brought in a wheelchair straight from her ward. She refused to stay behind. What happened? Daniel demanded as a doctor met them outside the glass partition. Your daughter has acute kidney failure, the doctor said gravely. We need to run more tests, but she'll require dialysis immediately. Long-term. He hesitated. Long-term. We're looking at the possibility of a transplant. Amara's breath caught. A transplant? She's only 7. The doctor's eyes softened but didn't waver. We'll need to test close relatives for compatibility. Parents are usually our first check. Daniel and Cheeky exchanged a glance. Amara was already nodding, willing to do whatever it took when Ruth's voice, calm, almost too calm, cut in. Test me first. The doctor looked at her. Ma'am, we usually begin with... Test me, Ruth repeated, firmer this time. Type O negative, healthy liver, decent blood pressure, I know the drill. Amara blinked at her. How do you even know your type? Ruth's gaze flickered to Daniel. Because I've been tested before. Many times. The siblings didn't miss the way she said it, heavy with something unsaid. The doctor nodded to a nurse who wheeled Ruth toward the lab. The siblings trailed behind, not speaking until they reached a quieter hallway. Daniel stopped her. Why are you so sure about this? And why did you ask about Muna earlier before we even knew she was sick? Ruth hesitated. Her hands twisted the hospital blanket on her lap. Because for the past year I've been watching her. Quietly. I volunteer at the community clinic near her school. I saw the signs, the tiredness, the swelling, but I couldn't come to you without opening all the doors I've kept shut. Amara's voice was shaky. You knew my daughter was sick, and you didn't say anything? I knew she would need me, Ruth said simply. That's why I stayed nearby. Daniel's mind reeled. This woman they'd written off as lost had been within reach all this time, close enough to guard them without them knowing. The nurse returned. Ma'am, we'll have the results in a few hours. In the meantime, your granddaughter is being stabilized. Amara pressed her palms to her face, fighting tears. If you're a match. I'll do it, Ruth said without hesitation, even if it costs me. The doctor appeared again, looking unusually grave. Mrs. Okoro, Adebayo, whoever you are. He glanced at the clipboard. There's something interesting in your file. Before you became homeless, you had consistent checkups here, And you always ask the same question. How soon can a healthy woman donate a kidney to a child? The siblings stared at her, realization dawning. Ruth had been preparing for this day long before any of them knew Muna would need saving. The rain had eased into a soft mist by the time Cheeky returned from the shelter Ruth had once stayed in. His hands were full, one carrying a weathered cardboard box, the other gripping a crumpled receipt from the shelter's office. He set the box on the hospital waiting room table, its flaps sagging from years of wear. They kept her belongings in storage when she left, he said quietly. They said she never came back for them. Daniel opened the box first, sifting through the contents. A threadbare sweater, a pair of worn sandals, a set of prayer beads, and at the very bottom, a leather-bound notebook with a broken clasp. Amara's fingers trembled as she opened it. The first page was written in Ruth's familiar looping handwriting. If they ever find this, let them know I love them more than my own name. The pages unfolded like a confession and a map. Entry after entry told of her nights working as a cleaner in clinics and offices, saving every spare naira to send anonymous money orders to her children. She wrote of skipping meals so she could pay for Daniel's first apartment deposit, of walking 5 miles in the rain to deliver cash for Amara's exam fees, of secretly funding Cheeky's visa application when he thought a friend had helped. They read in silence, the words hitting like blows. I signed away the house so Boma wouldn't touch them. He wanted more than the deed, but I told him he'd have to kill me first. The papers cost me my roof, but they bought my children's safety. Cheek swallowed hard, flipping further. The ink changed slightly, shakier in later entries. Saw Muna outside her school today. Her eyes looked tired. Must speak to the nurse at the clinic. If my time comes before hers, I need to know she'll be safe. Daniel leaned over to see the last page. It ended abruptly, the handwriting trailing off mid-sentence. If Muna ever needs me, tell them I am O-negative and willing. The line cut off. The pen stroke smudged as though she'd been interrupted. Amara shut the book, pressing it to her chest as if it might disappear. She never stopped being our mother. We just stopped being her children. Daniel rubbed his eyes, the weight of their years of silence pressing into his bones. We blamed her for saving us. Jake pulled something else from the box, a laminated hospital visitor's pass. On the back, a faded photo showed Ruth in scrubs, standing beside a line of children at a health outreach. The date was 2 years ago. She's been around all along, Jake murmured. We just never looked. Before anyone could speak, a nurse hurried into the waiting area, her eyes darting to Amara. We have the compatibility results for your daughter's transplant. You'll want to hear this together. They followed her down the hall, each step heavier than the last. The doctor waited outside Ruth's room, chart in hand. It's a match, he said. Your mother can save her life. But the surgery will be risky for her. Very risky. The doctor's words hung in the air like a slow tolling bell. Your mother is a perfect match, he repeated, glancing at Ruth's chart. But her overall health isn't ideal. The surgery could weaken her permanently, and there's a real risk she might not make it through. Amara felt the floor tilt beneath her. There must be another way. What about me? Daniel? Chike? We tested all of you, the doctor said gently. None of you are compatible. Without this surgery, your daughter's condition will worsen quickly. Ruth sat propped up against the hospital bed pillows, her thin frame wrapped in a pale green gown. Her eyes moved from one child to the next, calm but unwavering. There is no decision to make. We do the surgery. Daniel shook his head. No, not if it could kill you. Ruth gave him a faint smile. You think I'm afraid to die? Daniel, I've been dying in small pieces for years. Living without my children, watching from the shadows while strangers stood where I should have been. That was worse than death. This is living again. This is being your mother. Amara's eyes filled. Mama, you can't just... I can, Ruth said firmly. I will. The day I brought you into this world, I promised God I'd protect you for as long as I had breath. That promise doesn't end because you're grown, and it doesn't end because it's dangerous. Cheek stepped forward, his voice breaking. We threw you out. We believed lies. You owe us nothing. Ruth reached for his hand. Exactly. I owe you nothing. That's why this is love. It's given freely. The room was thick with emotion, but the doctor cut in, practical and pressing. We can't delay long. Every hour counts for the child. Daniel turned to Ruth, his voice low. You're sure about this? I've been sure for years, she said. Why do you think I kept myself healthy, even when I had nothing? Why do you think I asked those doctors all those questions? Amara's sob escaped before she could stop it. We don't deserve you. You're my children, Ruth said softly. Deserving has nothing to do with it. The doctor nodded toward the hallway. We'll prep her for surgery. The transplant team is ready. As the nurses began moving her bed, Ruth caught Daniel's hand and squeezed hard. You take care of Muna, and take care of each other. No more years lost. Daniel's throat tightened. I promise. She smiled faintly, then looked at all three of them. Now let a mother be a mother. As they wheeled her toward the operating room, the storm outside broke again, rain hammering the hospital windows, while the siblings stood rooted knowing this night might be the last they ever see her alive. The rain battered the hospital windows in relentless sheets, turning the glass into a trembling mirror that reflected the siblings' restless pacing. The surgical wing was too bright, too cold, and too quiet, except for the occasional shuffle of nurses' shoes and the muffled beeping from unseen machines. Daniel stood with his hands jammed deep into his pockets, staring at the surgery in progress light above the double doors, as if he could will it to turn green. Amara sat hunched over in one of the rigid plastic chairs, Muna's stuffed rabbit clutched in her lap, rocking slightly with each breath. Cheek leaned against the wall, eyes closed, earbuds in with no music playing, just blocking out the world. No one spoke for a long while. Words felt too small for the moment. It was Cheek who broke the silence, voice low. Do you remember the night we threw her out? Amara flinched. Don't. But Cheek pressed on, his words heavy. I do. I remember Boma standing in our living room with those papers. I remember Daniel. You closing the door while she was still begging to explain. Daniel's jaw tightened. I thought I was protecting us. I thought she'd brought that debt on herself. You didn't see her face after you locked it, Cheek said quietly. I did. She stood there in the rain for a long time before she walked away. She didn't shout. She didn't curse us. She just left. Amara's eyes brimmed. And we never even asked her side of the story. A nurse passed by, her expression giving nothing away. The siblings lapsed back into silence, each swallowed by their own private reel of memory. Daniel's mind drifted to a day years ago. Him, 10 years old, breaking his arm after falling from the mango tree in the yard. Ruth had carried him on her back for miles to the nearest clinic because the neighbor's car had no fuel. She'd kept him laughing the whole way so he wouldn't cry. Amara remembered sitting with Ruth on the veranda during blackouts, the woman's soft voice telling stories to drown out the hum of mosquitoes. She'd promised Amara that even if the world turned cruel, she'd always find her. Cheek thought of the time Ruth had shown up to his football match uninvited, cheering so loudly it embarrassed him. But afterward, when they won, she'd been the first to hug him, sweaty jersey and all. A sudden alarm blared from behind the surgical doors. The siblings shot to their feet, hearts in their throats. A doctor pushed through quickly, calling for a crash cart. Amara's knees buckled and Daniel caught her. What's happening? He shouted after the doctor, but there was no answer, only the swinging of the double doors as they closed again. The hallway felt smaller, air tighter. Minutes crawled. The storm outside raged on. Then finally, the surgery in progress light flicked off. The doors opened, and the lead surgeon stepped out, his cap still on, face unreadable. He pulled off his mask and said, Your mother is alive, but you need to prepare yourselves. The surgeon's words seemed to stretch in the air, heavy and slow. Alive, but prepare yourselves. What does that mean? Daniel asked, his voice sharper than he intended. The doctor exhaled. The transplant was successful. Your daughter's vitals are improving already. But your mother, her body struggled under the anesthesia. She's stable for now, but the next 48 hours will be critical. She'll need close monitoring, and she may face a long recovery, if she recovers fully. Amara pressed a hand to her mouth, torn between relief for Muna and fear for Ruth. Can we see her? The doctor nodded. One at a time. But there's something else. The hospital charity office asked me to pass along some information. I think you'll want to hear it. He led them to a small side office where an older woman in a navy blazer was waiting, a thick ledger open on the desk. She smiled gently. Your mother is extraordinary. For years, we've had an anonymous donor named R. Adebayo contributing to our pediatric emergency fund. Always in small amounts, but always consistent. Enough to cover treatments for children whose parents couldn't pay. Chiki frowned. She barely had anything herself. The woman nodded. She earned it. Your mother worked night cleaning shifts in this hospital. She trained other widows to sew scrubs for extra income. Every naira she earned above her rent and food, she donated here. Quietly. Never once asked for recognition. Daniel stared at the ledger. Why would she do that? She had her own children to worry about. The woman turned a page. Oh, she worried about her own children. Look, these entries are earmarked as special transfers. They leaned in. Their names stared back at them in neat handwriting. Daniel Okoro, N$150,000, housing deposit. Amara Obi, N$95,000, exam fees. Chika Okoro, N$210,000, visa application. Each date lined up with a time they'd been mysteriously helped by someone they never identified. The room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. Amara's voice broke. All this time, we thought she'd abandoned us, but she was carrying us. She gave up the only house she had, the woman said softly. Not because she lost it, but because she chose to protect you. That's what your Boma didn't tell you. Daniel swallowed hard, guilt clawing at his chest. We threw her out, and she still gave everything she had to us. The charity officer closed the ledger. She once told me, a mother's love is not a debt. It's an inheritance you can't spend away. A nurse appeared at the doorway. Your mother's asking for her children. They walked together down the quiet corridor toward Ruth's recovery room. Inside, she lay pale but conscious, her eyes fluttering open as they approached. Amara knelt beside her, unable to stop the tears. Mama, why? Why didn't you tell us? Ruth smiled faintly, voice barely above a whisper. Because love doesn't need an audience. Before anyone could respond, the door creaked open. Boma stepped inside, his gaze cold. Touching scene, he said, but we're not done yet. Boma's voice slithered into the room, dripping with mock sympathy. I came to offer my congratulations and collect what's mine. Daniel stepped between him and the bed, his hands curling into fists. You've taken enough from her. Get out. Boma smirked. Careful, Daniel. You don't know the full cost of her little act of heroism. There are papers, agreements, things you wouldn't want the world to see. Cheek moved to the other side, blocking his path. We know about the house. We know about the lies, and we know you threatened her. Boma chuckled low. Threatened? She had choices. She made them. Don't paint her as some saint. She is. Amara snapped, rising from her chair. And you're about to pay for what you did. At that moment, the door opened again. This time it was a police officer accompanied by the hospital's legal counsel. The charity officer stood behind them, holding the ledger like a weapon. This is Mr. Boma? The officer asked. Yes, Daniel said, his voice steady. The counsel stepped forward. We have evidence of forged debt documents, illegal transfer of property, and coercion. The charity's records and the witness statements from hospital staff are enough to reopen the case. Boma's smirk faltered. You can't prove anything. The counsel slid a folder across the small table by the bed. "We can, and we will. You're under arrest." The officer read him his rights while cuffing his wrists. Boma's eyes darted to Ruth one last time. "You think this changes anything? You're still a pauper." Ruth's voice, though weak, carried enough to cut through the air. "No, Boma. I'm rich in ways you'll never understand." They led him out. The room felt lighter without him, as if a storm cloud had finally passed. Days later, the siblings stood together in a small courtroom as the deed to their father's house was declared null and void. The legal process would take months, but they had already decided the house wouldn't just be theirs again. Months passed. The paint was stripped, the walls repaired, the mango tree replanted. The front of the house now bore a new sign: Ruth's Table. It wasn't just a home, it was a place where single mothers could eat for free, where scholarships were given in the name of women who had fought quietly for their children. The kitchen always smelled of fresh bread and pepper soup, and the veranda was alive with laughter. On the day of the opening, Ruth, still thin but walking stronger, stood at the gate. Muna, now healthy, darted between the tables with a tray of juice cups. Daniel stood beside his mother, microphone in hand. "We built this in your name," he said, voice trembling. "Because you gave us more than we ever deserved, and because you showed us that love isn't measured by what's kept, but by what's given away." Ruth's eyes glistened. She took the scissors and cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. Amara hugged her first, then Cheek, then Daniel, each holding on a little longer than they needed to. As they stepped inside, rain began to fall again, gentle this time, warm against their skin. Muna ran across the yard and straight into Ruth's arms, her laughter ringing above the sound of the rain. Ruth closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. "We're home," she whispered. And for the first time in years, they all believed it.